Hello guys, and welcome back to Joe's Ventures. And today we're doing part 206, if you can believe it or not, of our Planet Zoo mod spotlights, where we took a look at some of the wonderful mods people are making and talk about some of the wonderful biodiversity that we share our world with. So today, we've actually got an animal that I've wanted to talk about for a good long while, so I'm quite excited. You can probably see it on the tin. But we've got a lot of other cool assortment of animals. You know, we got exhibit animals you can see there. We've also got some fish and a lot of mammals, including some extinct mammals. So it's going to be quite cool. So we're going to be starting off today with a mod by Scott. We all know we love Scott's mods. All the cool little beasties he makes. So this one is the Yucatan Rust-rump tarantula. See if you can find one in a good light, because it's what we want to see them in a good light. I feel like it's almost impossible at the moment. Might have to try and... That one's... No. Might have to quickly just get rid of all the enrichment in there. That's fine, we can do that just for a minute. There we are. There's one in a good light that we can have a look at. There we are. Perfect. So here is Tuticol epinearis, also the synonym of Brachypelma. These guys are a species of spider in the family Therapsidae, which is the tarantulas, and is found in the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico. So the main holotype of this species is about 50, has a total body length of about 50 millimeters, and that's the male holotype. The fourth leg is the longest, it's 62 millimeters, and the carapace, as you can see, is kind of legs are sort of brown, and the abdomen is black, where they get the kind of name, the rust red. So they've got rusty red hairs, or cerate on their backs there. And they've also got, you see these hairs on the kind of the femur and the first leg as well. So they were originally described as Europalma Ichiriana by Ralph Chamberlain in 1925. They were transferred to the genus Brachypelma by Andrew Smith in 1993. Then described a male and female, both of them as well. And then in 19, it was actually proposed these guys were their own genus of Tulocol, not Brachypelma, and Azastus has been accepted by the World Spider Catalogue. So these guys are quite a cool spider. They are found in the central Yucatan in most forests and rainforests, which is kind of weird they put them in a habitat like this, but anyway. Apparently closely related to Tuticol vagans, which is much less widespread in southeastern Mexico. And all species of these guys are actually protected by the pet trade. For the pet trade, as they can, people try to protect them because they're quite large, slow breeding spiders. But nonetheless, they are caught and smuggled out because a lot of people do want to keep them. So if you ever want to try that, at least get a captive bred one, because you don't want to be supporting that kind of trade. Captive bred with these kind of animals is always the go anyway. So really beautiful animal. Have a look. We kind of mentioned it. Closely related to the Mexican red-rump tarantula. Let's have a look. See if you can find any information in any way. These tarantulas are known for their generally calm and docile temperament, making them a good choice for keepers of varying skill level. They're burrowers by nature, creating silken retreats in their substrate, and relatively hardy and long-lived. As of July 2022, contains 7 species. So that's the genus Teolotocol, with the curly-haired tarantulas and Mexican red rump. So yeah, that's a little bit more information on this guy. Not too distinct compared to other tarantulas. Still a cool species though, as you can see. Beautiful colours, likes to hide out and eat bugs and things like that. Really, really cool. Anyway, that's another really cool Scots mod. Next up, we got one by Jay Qualix, and makes some really awesome fish. I like how the return of the fish mods. We've got here, this is the Sergeant Major. So these guys are also called the Pantano. Adoloduf saxatilis. These guys are a species of damselfish. So another really cool little guy here. Let's have a look. Let's see if we can zoom in a bit. I think that's as much as I'll zoom in because, these are quite small. These guys are found in the Atlantic Ocean, with populations found in the western part of the Atlantic Ocean, from the northeastern coast of the US to the Gulf of Mexico, islands around the Caribbean, and around Central South America, and around Uruguay as well. In the eastern Atlantic, they can be found in Portugal, the Azores, the Canary Islands, and Western Africa. It is unknown whether they are in the Mediterranean, because they are closely related species to them that look very similar, so it can be hard to ID them. But they tend to actually be quite big. They get to about 22 centimeters in length, or about 9 inches in length. Juveniles tend to be more common in tidal pools. Adults tend to be around coastal reefs, and they can be found up to 40 meters, or about 130 feet deep. As I mentioned, they can get up to 22 centimeters, but they typically grow to about 15 centimeters, so between 9 and 5.9 inches, with the largest recorded specimen being about 200 grams. So that's quite interesting as well. And you can see this fish has white with a yellow top, and it also has 5 black or dark blue vertical stripes going down its back, with a faint 6-1 maybe present on the peduncle. So you're going to see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Adult males also tend to have a more bluish coloration, and their stripes tend to be less visible, with a dark spot surrounding their pectoral fins. So you can see, let's see if this is a male or female. So this is like a female. Let's see if you can spot a male. So you can see not too different, at least in this model, but you can have a look there. So in terms of their diet, this fish feeds upon larvae and invertebrates, zooplankton, such as copepods and shrimp larvae, pelagic tunicates, smaller fish, crustaceans, and various species of algae, both benthic and pelagic. And they've also been known to feed on the waste and vomit of spinner dolphins, so that's quite interesting as well. In terms of behaviour, they tend to hang out in shoals of about several hundred individuals. Sometimes they get cleaned of parasites by other fish species such as gobies, and they also are another cleaner species for species like sea turtles as well. So that's how they kind of catch a feed as well. So they get cleaned by other species, but they also clean larger species, which is quite cool. And they do have quite a few predators. In the aquarium trade, they are found in the aquarium trade, but they are very difficult to breed. In terms of their breeding, they are an oviparous species, so they lay eggs, and the males will create nests in rocks, reefs, outcrops, shipwrecks, and pilings, where the females lay their eggs masses. The males will actively chase the females in courtship before the female releases about 200,000 or so eggs, and then attach them to the substrate by a filament, and the eggs will turn greenish after a few days, and then is guarded by the male. And as he guards the eggs, the male will become bluish in colour and guard them for about a week. In terms of their etymology, they get the name the Sergeant Major. They get their name from the brightly striped sides, known as bars, as they are reminiscent of the insignia of a military Sergeant Major. So it's kind of, a rank in the military. It kind of reminds them as well. But yeah, really, really cool little fish. Nice to see some variety. I'd love to see some cool little guys getting some love. Next up as well, we've got by Sky Polaris. We've got a couple other subspecies of some animals there. So we've got here, let me spin that over there. There we are. They seem to be just climbing together. We'll move one just to have a little look. So here is the Bornean sun bear. So the Bornean sun bear is not too different from sun bears, and I'll just go quick overview of the sun bear and then talk about what makes it a different one. So the sun bear, is a bear species from the tropical forests of Southeast Asia, and the only member of their genus Heliarctos. They're also the smallest bear species. They get about 70 centimeters, or about 28 inches in its shoulder, and about 25 to 65 kilograms, or between 55 to 143 pounds. And you can see they've got large paws. They've got really long tongues as well, that allows them to lick into things as well. And you can see they're typically jet black with this kind of light face and light kind of moon shape on their chest there. Very, very interesting species. So I've already covered sun bears because there's already the sun bear in the game. I'm not going to go too much into detail. I feel like that would be a little bit unfair. And you can see they also look like a guy in a suit, which is, always really funny. So it's nice to have more sun bears. So sun bears naturally are divided into 2 different subspecies. So there is the Malayan sun bear, which is the type subspecies, the Heliarctos malleus malleus. And this is Eurysphilus, which is the Bornean sun bear. So really, the only differences that I can find on the internet that define the different subspecies is that one is in mainland Malaysia, and the other one is in Borneo, and the slight differences in the skulls between these populations. But in reality, there's probably not too much genetic difference because Borneo and Malaysia were all connected in part of Sundaland as far as the Ice Age, so probably about 10, 15,000 years ago. So a sun bear could walk from Borneo to Thailand, pretty much. And we do have fossils of them from Thailand living with extinct like stegodons and wild water buffalo and a variety of extinct and living mammals in there. So they would have lived across Sundaland, which would have been out of the water at the time. But just as the Ice Age kind of comes and goes, that's when the islands such as Borneo and Malaysia and was when Sumatra come out to be a thing. But these guys are really, yeah, as I mentioned, found in Borneo. And yeah, still really cool though. Nice to see Skullparis doing a cool mod. But we've got another cool mod from them as well. We're going to have a look at the Caspian tiger. So we love more tiger mods. And this is technically an extinct tiger as well, technically, but we'll get into that. So look at this really cool guy here. So this is a Caspian tiger. This is a population of Panthera tigris, native to eastern Turkey, northern Iran, Mesopotamia, the Caucasus Mountains around the Caspian Sea, central northern Afghanistan, and up into China. And up until the Middle Ages, they were actually present in southern Russia. So in terms of their taxonomy, they were considered their own species, Felis vitagra, but then got whittled down into quite a few different subspecies as well. There was originally about 8 tiger subspecies, and the Caspian was kind of considered one of them. But at the start of the 21st century, they were looking into tigers and suggested that they looked into the mitochondrial DNA, and it seems that Caspian tigers and Siberian tigers are actually very similar in terms of genetics. And they would have shared a common ancestor probably about 10,000 years ago. And that's kind of now come up to the thinking that these guys would have been just the same as Siberian tigers, but they were separated due to human... they weren't different subspecies because they were separated very much. They were separated due to human influences, like humans dividing up their habitat, as we do with a lot of things. And, with the Great Silk Road, that could have been a big divider for tiger populations. And they were likely a very continuous population up until the early 19th century, but then they became isolated due to the Industrial Revolution and things like that. Then in 2015, there was another big one as well. They shrunk all of them to 2 subspecies, which may not still be true. Taxonomy. But you've got the mainland continental tiger and the Sundaland island tiger. So that includes Sumatran, Bali, Javan tigers. And this is on a mainland, so it'd be considered a mainland tiger as well. But either way, I would honestly personally lump it into the Siberian tiger. So that would have been one population. And we know they were continuous until the 19th century. So it would have been kind of like the northern tiger or something like that. I think that's a better way to kind of describe it. So from what we know of their characteristics, photographs of fur of Caspian and Siberian tigers suggest these guys were generally had fur that was more varied and generally brighter or more uniform than Siberian tigers. Also had narrower skulls that were fuller and more closely set to those of the tigers of Manchuria. They also come in, colours, a mixture of brown and cinnamon shades, and clawback patterns were invariably only found on the head, neck, in the middle of the back, and the tip of the tail. And angular patterns on the base of the tail were least developed to those of the Far Eastern populations. And in contrast between the summer and winter coats was sharp, though not as the same extent as Eastern populations, because they weren't living in quite cool places. The winter coat was paler, and then, they're typically more bright as well. And the summer coat was slightly denser in hair length compared to the Bengal tiger, though it had narrower stripes. And then the thickest fur among tigers, since it did occur in quite temperate areas in Asia. In terms of its size, it got to about a body length of 270 to 295 centimeters, or 106 to 116 inches, and weighed about 170 to 240 kilograms, or 370 to 530 pounds, with females being 240 to 260 centimeters, or about 94 to 102 inches, and weigh between 85 and 135 kilograms as well. And that's kind of this big, large skulls as well, and they ranked among the largest cats. We'll have a look at the male there as well. So they were among the largest extinct cats, along with the Siberian tiger, which, very similar sized, but a bit of Burmese rule as well. And they did attain quite exceptional sizes. There is a museum specimen that has a head to body length of about 7 feet long, or about 2.25 meters, as well, and quite big skulls as well. So it seems like these guys may have got a little bit larger as well, and then 270 centimeters, or 8'9" as well. There was a big tiger there with a plus a 90 centimeter long tail. So some quite big tigers that exist back in the day. Some extreme individuals, the Shaquille O'Neals of tigers. In terms of distribution, though, they were, as I mentioned, they were found across kind of the Silk Road. They were found in the Eastern Anatolia regions. They also found in the Caucasus, the Caspian Sea, Central Asia as well. And their form of distribution could actually be approximately kind of found within the ungulates of the region. So they seem to have, in the areas they used to live, like things like wild boar would be quite common. Red and roe deer would also be quite common. Camels would also be common around the Aral Sea as parts of their range. So they probably had quite a varied diet of large ungulates. Though during the late Pleistocene to Holocene, they were actually likely connected to Bengal tiger populations, so there would have been, and Siberian tiger populations, so there would have been a little less separation than there would have been during the last few centuries, because they could, actively breed with each other. But they did become extinct locally. So the demise of the Caspian tiger kind of began with the Russian colonization of Turkestan during the late 19th century. And this was because they were killed by large parties, because these personnel are military personnel and sportsmen that hunted veteran camels and wild boar and things like that would have caused a rapid decline in their prey populations. Also, their reed kind of habitats was taken over by human crops, things like planting cotton and other things. And also they were quite restricted, vulnerable to the restricted nature of their distribution. And until the 20th century, they used to declare predators from forests, so basically they would try to exterminate them and their prey. And the last sightings as well, the last sighting was in Iraq in 1887. A pair of tigers were originally killed in 1943 in Turkey. The last populations comes from Kazakhstan. The last wild Caspian tiger was recorded in 1948. So that's kind of believed to be the last one, which is really sad because, we want more tigers in the world. We don't want that more. We don't have any more. No information is really available on their home ranges, but we know they, very similar to other tiger subspecies or other tiger populations, they would have been eating large ungulates. They would like wild pigs and cervids in most of their range. They'd also be eating Caspian deer and Bactrian deer and roe deer and gazelles in Iran. Also, other small mammals would have been, on the menu, but also small competition as well. They would have eaten wild horses, wild asses, mountain sheep, moose, waipati. So a lot of different species, pretty much anything big enough, they probably would have been eating lots of large ungulates. But in terms of conservation, there was some effort to try and protect them. But sadly came a little bit too late. In Iran, the Caspian tigers actually became protected in 1957 with heavy fines for shooting. So it's very unlikely, they were already probably extinct in the area by the time these came into place. But there were some in captivity. They were housed in Berlin Zoo in the late 19th century. And the kind of last individual was found, lived in Brookfield Zoo in Chicago in 7th of May 1935, and was still living on the 1st of January 1948. So that was kind of the 1950s was the extinction of the Caspian tiger. But what's quite interesting as well, there is effort to try and reintroduce Siberian tigers into, so it's kind of a bit of rewilding. So because Caspian and Siberian tigers are very similar, probably even the same, I would argue they're literally the same thing. There have been efforts to try and reintroduce the Siberian tiger into Central Asia, where these Caspian tigers once roamed, which is a good idea. Siberian tigers are already quite endangered. There's only a few hundred of them left. Having another secure population was a really good idea. That's, if anything happened to the Siberian population in Russia, in China, there would be another population here that we can use to, back and forth. So, don't have all your eggs in one basket kind of thing. And there has been some studies looking into potential sites and feasibility of this kind of project. But a viable tiger population would require at least 5,000 square kilometers of large tracts of continuous habitat with lots of prey. And there's actually no habitat for that piner population available at the moment. So there is a lot of kind of rewilding kind of coming on to try and introduce different boars and things. Though there have been some efforts as well. There's restoration have been trying to, restore these habitats, and it's a great example of how actually species introductions can be used as a way to kind of motivate rewilding. Because a lot of people think there's kind of the opposite way. Like, and sometimes I'm guilty of this too. You think like, wouldn't you want to start from the bottom? Wouldn't you want to start with the prey and then the tigers? But kind of, if people want the tigers, they're a very charismatic species, and it's like, why don't you kind of they make the effort because they want the tigers, okay, the tigers need this, and they put in the effort. They're doing a lot in New Zealand with kakapo, they want to get pest-free areas. So I'm thinking like the kakapo is such a big species, they need a lot of habitat. So that's a great species to try and like motivate people to make the changes necessary so we can have more kakapo in the world. And it's the same with the Caspian tiger. That's kind of the best example. They're trying to encourage, if we want Caspian tigers, we need to do all this because, they're a top predator. They got to eat these large ungulates. So helping with habitat restoration and prey introductions and things like that. So that's going to be quite cool. And in autumn 2023, there actually was some captive tigers that were from the Netherlands been arrived into a natural reserve in Kazakhstan, and another 3 or 4 tigers were also introduced into Russia, to try and help establish another population, which is quite cool. And in culture, they were once imported from Africa and Asia in Roman empires, for gladiatorial events and things like that. And it's quite cool. So yeah, another cool Caspian tiger, and one that does, in some way, definitely have a future. But I would argue, Caspian tigers and Siberian tigers are basically the same thing. If probably 10,000 years in terms of genetics is barely anything. I don't think many people would say that. The reason is because people like to have their own tigers and things like that. But in reality, they're probably just a different, slightly, as I mentioned, they only would have been breeding, and they would have been connected to Siberia only last couple 100 years. So, there's pretty much no difference there. And I like that we're doing more with these tigers. Nice to see these guys being a figurehead for rewilding and things like that. But yeah, really, really cool. So we're going to move on to the next species. So these two were both done by Sky Polaris. Did a really cool job there. Next one done by Great Cakes Mod. How can you not love a Great Cakes Mod? So Great Cakes Mod has, just one thing for today. But we've got here, this is a extinct species called Europodon. So these guys are actually really weird extinct mammals. These guys are a genus of Oreodont that belong in the family Myricodontidae. And they lived from the Oligocene, about 30,000 to about, not 30,000, 30 million to 24 million years ago, and lived for about 6 million years. So, very, very cool. The Mesolactidae kind of Oreodonts were kind of an extinct group of prehistoric Artiodactyls that were very kind of also very pig-like superficially, and they were actually originally considered a type of pig, but now actually they're considered to be more closely related to camels. So they're kind of an extinct group of prehistoric ungulates. In terms of these guys, they're actually among the largest species in the Myricodontidae, and they're about the size of a sheep, and their fossils have been found in some of the largest found in the Badlands. They were much larger than all of their relatives, such as Machairodon and Minochirus, which were lived with in the late Oligocene. But on the other hand, it was also quite rare, and only makes about 1% of the Oreodonts in the Badlands. Either it lived in different habitats or it just wasn't that common, specifically if it was quite a large animal for the Oligocene. Really, really beautiful, I think. Their skull is shorter and squatter than those of Machairodon and Minocerus as well. And there's kind of a few different species. These guys would have been, large herbivores. They probably would have had some niche partitioning with all these different species, which is really, really cool. But we can talk a little bit more about the Machairodonts or the Oreodonts. So, yeah, they're very, very cool guys here. They look, rather pig-like or sheep-like, but they're, as I mentioned, more closely related to camels. and they did have a lot of ecologies very similar to modern ungulates, like as I mentioned, lived like pigs. There were some potentially some hippo-like ones as well, and they would have lived across most of pretty much all of North America is where they're found, because America was quite separated as well. So that's quite cool. And these guys would have been quite large grazers too, which is quite cool. So yeah, these guys would have been kind of that large grazer ecosystem, and so, there were only other species, taking hippo niches and browsers and stuff like that. So they took a lot of those niches. Very interesting group of animals, Oriodonts, and you can see they're quite cute as well. And yeah, they're only really found in America, and they would have probably gone extinct. They actually lived up until about the Pliocene, so and the Neogene. So that's quite interesting. So they probably got outcompeted by a lot of other, Asian imports in terms of their ecology, because a lot of animals that we think of as North American, actually came from Asia, and then a lot of animals that we think Asia are actually North American, like horses and camels. And funny enough, we do have a mod by Monsoon. We do love Monsoon. That is a horse. So Monsoon actually has two different mods today, but this one's an extinct one. So this is the giant horse, Equus gigas. So this one is actually considered nomen dubium. So it's just another type of horse, but it may come out to be true or a true species in some time. So Equus gigas, or the giant horse, or Giganteus, is a species of horse which lived in North America, and it's based on a single tooth from Texas, which is larger than the teeth of even the largest giraffe horses. So things, like Clydesdales and things like that. So it's larger than them. Based on the tooth, which is, erroneous scaling, definitely, it would have been estimated between 1.2 to 1,200 to 1,500 kilograms, so up to about 1.5 tons, and a height of about 2.25 meters, or about 7 foot tall, 7 foot 5 inches at the shoulder. So quite cool. And because of its quite fragmentary remains, it's considered nomen dubium. Nomen dubium it doesn't necessarily mean that the animal didn't exist, because obviously the fossil exists. Nomen dubium means it's an animal, like we don't have really enough to say that we can define it as a different species. It could just be an abnormally large population of your modern wild horse. And if we found other specimens, like, what are we gonna, compare it to? We just got this big tooth. We have basically nothing to really compare to other animals. So that's kind of how we do that. But still a really, really cool model, and did a really cool job with that. And we got to have a look at the little foal, looking really, really cute little black foal. I'd say adorable. But last but certainly not least, we've got another really cool animal by Monsoon. Two mods from Monsoon today. How amazing! We have got here the Indri. So this is one I've wanted to cover for a good hot minute, and it's a really, really cool one. So this is the Indri, which is also called the Babakoktu or something. It is considered one of the largest, if not the largest, lemurs. It's really, really cool. So in terms of its name, the Indri comes from the native Malagasy name for the animal, Erindria, and another name is the Butterbok or something like that, and it's considered like an ancestor or father. So because they look very human-like superficially, so that's probably where they take it as well. Kotor means little boy, and Ratukor means like a distinctive little boy, father of a little boy. So it's a really cool name. Comes from native names. I like native names generally. I think they do quite a good job with that. Very, very superficially ape-like. A great example of convergent evolution, I think. Along with the diamondated Sifaka, which we have covered before, Monsoon did make a mod of that. These guys are considered the largest living lemur. They weren't the largest lemur of all time. They were gorilla-sized lemurs. These guys are the largest living lemur species. They have an average weight of about 6.5 kilograms, but can weigh up to about 9 kilograms. Or 9.5 kilograms, so up to about 21 pounds, or perhaps even up to 15 kilograms, or about 33 pounds. They have a head to body length of about 64 to 72 centimeters, or about 2 foot 1 to 2 foot 4.5 inches, and can reach about 120 centimeters, or about 4 feet, with their legs fully extended. So in terms of their kind of ecology, they are a vertical climber and leaper, and thus holds its body upright while traveling or resting in the branches. It has a long muscular legs that it uses to propel itself from trunk to trunk. It also has, you can see, those large greenish eyes, very superficially people-like. as you can see there, which is almost, freaky. Um, and a black face that is framed by round fuzzy ears. And what's really interesting as well, unlike a lot of other living lemurs, they don't have a very long tail. They've got a very short tail. Um, and the silky fur you can also see is kind of, got these black and white patterns, and they've got some different populations of different variation. So there's, if we go through have a look at the other ones soon, we'll see some different variation on their colors and stuff like that with the black patches. So they typically have black and white patches along their limbs, neck, crown, and lower back. And some northern populations have mostly or even entirely black individuals, with the face being bare and is sometimes fringed with white fur. So you can see this one's got a different one from the other ones as well. So let's have a look at another one, because we want to have a look at the different varieties, of course. Oh, and what is going on? I don't know what's going on there. That's my game being freaky. Let's have a look at you. That's not what I want to look at. There we are. My game's just being freaky weaky. That's alright. So in terms of these color variations, there were actually considered two different subspecies, with the Indri in the northern part of the habitat, and Indri vaginus variegatus in the southern part. But now, due to genetics, it actually suggests these are not actual genetic differences. It's just different populations having different colors. It's a decline. So northern populations tend to be more black, probably due to more sunny radiation and things like that. So it just happens, to be that way. It's not because they're genetically different to any meaningful degree. So in terms of behavior, these guys are also quite interesting. They practice long-term monogamy, which is quite interesting as well. So they seek a new partner only after the death of their mate. They live in small groups consisting of the mated male and female pair, along with their maturing offspring. In more fragmented forests, though, they actually may live in larger groups of up to several generations, with habitat fragmentation being a big reason why they limits their mobility for these larger groups to break into these smaller units. Like many other lemur species, they do live in a female-dominant society, so the dominant female often actually displace males to lower branches and poorer feeding grounds, which is typically the one led to by the group during travel. So they will typically common for groups to move about 300 to 700 meters every day, and I don't know why you're inside each other. This is not the kind of video we're looking for, but we'll have a look at another one. You can see this one's got a little bit more of a bright pattern as well. With most distance travel midsummer in search of fruit, they sleep in trees at about 10 to 30 meters tall, and typically sleep in pairs. And it's actually quite common to young female injuries, occasionally adult females, to silently play wrestle anywhere from a few seconds to 15 minutes. And members of a single group will urinate to defecate jointly in one of their many selected areas for defecation in their territory. So they are latrinas. That's probably the best way to put it. In terms of reproduction, we'll have a look at the little baby while we talk about reproduction. That's what happens. You get babies from reproducing. Oh, that's not what we wanted to do. We'll have a look at. Oh no, that's an adult. Come on. These guys are just too zippy. There we are. So here's this cute little guy here. So they reach sexual maturity at about 7 to 9 years old, and females bear offspring every 2 to 3 years, so they're quite slow breeding. They have a gestation period of about 120 to 150 days, and the single infant is usually born in May or June. Typically, the mother is the primary caretaker, but the father does also assist, remaining with his mate and offspring. Infants are born mostly or completely black and begin to show white coloration, if any, between 4 to 6 months of age. The infant will cling to its mother's belly until it's about 4 or 5 months old, at which time it's ready to move onto her back. And the injury begins to demonstrate independence about 8 months, but it will not fully leave its mother until it's about 2 years old, so it's a bit of a delayed, going on there. In terms of communication, these guys actually make quite loud, distinct calls, which can last from 45 seconds or more to more than 3 minutes. Song duration and structure does vary within groups, but most songs kind of have a 3-phase pattern. Usually there's a roaring sequence that lasts for several seconds, which is preceded by more characteristic vocalizations. All members of the groups, except the very young, participate in this roar, but the song is proper is dominated by the adult pair. And they follow the roar with a loud note sequence, and that can be up to 5 seconds in duration. And then the wails as well, after descending, the wails become a high note, and purity goes lower pitched. So different injury groups will also tend to sing sequentially, responding one to another, as well as solidifying contacts between groups that may actually communicate territorial boundaries and defenses, environmental conditions, reproductive potential, and warning signals. And they may sing after disturbances such as thunder, airplanes, bird calls, or other level calls. And the group will sing almost every day and up to about 7 times a day. And the highest kind of frequency you'll hear from injury singing is in the breeding season from December to March. So that's kind of tells you a little bit more about these guys. So I want to zoom out and have a look at the adults again. I like this one here. Really, really cool. Nice to see some, cool to see some variation, improvements on the mod, but still really, really cool. Maybe it's just I just happened to get a lot of them that looked quite similar. But anyway, that's still really, really cool mod. Several other injury vocalizations have been identified. So there's the roar, which is used as a warning. For aerial predators such as hawks, they also hoot and honk to warn of terrestrial predators such as fossa. And other vocal categories includes grunt, kiss, wheeze, and hum. And the purposes of these kind of vocalizations are not really well understood. And before singing as well, they will move to the treetops and then allows them to be heard up to 4 kilometers away. In terms of their diet, they are mostly herbivorous and primarily folivores, so they prefer young or tender leaves mostly, but they will also eat seeds, fruits, and flowers. Female injuries seem to have actually a greater preference for immature leaves than males and spend more time foraging among them. A wider variety of plant species are consumed, with members of the laurel family featuring prominently in their diet, and the injury consumes little non-tree vegetation. To feed, they'll also pluck off a leaf and other part with their teeth, and it uses its hand to pull those tree branches to its mouth. And reproductively mature females have priority access to food, therefore they tend to forage higher in the trees than males. In terms of their distribution, they are found in lowland and montane forests along the eastern coast of Madagascar. So that's kind of where they're found. That's where they're mostly found around the area. So kind of, you know how the bit sticks out the top? They kind of go flat from the middle. But yeah, really, really cool. In terms of mythology, they're actually considered revered and are actually protected by cultural taboos, as they're considered to be a sacred animal. There's a legend of a man who went hunting in the forest and did not return. His absence worried his son, who went out to look for him, and when the son also disappeared, the rest of the villagers ventured to seek for both of them, but they only found 2 large lemurs sitting there. The first injury, the boy and his father were transformed into the injury. In some versions, only the son transformed, and the wailing of the Butterbrook is the father wailing for his lost son. So that's really sad. But another human characteristic of the injury is behavior in the sun. Like its Safaka relatives, they actually engage in sunbathing or sun worshipping. With the sun rising in the morning, they will sit on a tree with their legs crossed, back straight. Almost look like they're kind of, doing yoga or meditating, which is quite funny as well. And it's tend to be over anthropomorphic, but the Malayan people do believe they actually do worship the sun. So that's quite funny. But in terms of their conservation, they are considered critically endangered, I believe. Yes, they are considered critically endangered, which is really sad. So the first film actually was found, they managed to use tape lures, and ZooQuest to Madagascar managed to, by David Attenborough, managed to find some and catch some. And they are sadly very critically endangered. So the population is believed to be between 1,000 and 10,000 individuals. And the population is believed to be rapidly shrinking, where it may diminish by 80% in the next 3 generations, or about 36 years. And the primary threats to these guys, along with a lot of Malagasy wildlife, tends to be habitat destruction and fragmentation due to slash and burn agriculture, fuel wood gathering and logging, and this even occurs in protected areas because the laws, are not really well enforced in Madagascar. They're also widely hunted, despite many of those taboos that hold it sacred, with cultural erosion and immigration kind of partly to blame to break down those beliefs. In some cases, they'll also resent the protective whāled as a way to circumvent them. People who are whāri forbid themselves from eating the injury may still hunt the lemurs and sell their flesh, though it's forbidden to kill the injury may still purchase or consume them. They're also quite prized as a delicacy in some regions, which is quite sad. And there have been attempts to try and breed them in captivity, but they really just don't do well in captivity. They're one of those species that the husbandry is just not figured out. And the longest one lived was over a year. and none have bred successfully in captivity, but they have been kept in kind of semi-wild conditions in Madagascar. But yeah, you're not going to find them in a zoo, sadly. The only place you're going to find them is in Madagascar. But yeah, that's another really, really cool animal done by Monsoon. You know, Monsoon killing it. Really, really awesome mod. Definitely a big fan. So yeah, that's about it for today. So I'm going to thank everyone. You know, thank you Scott, thank you Jay Quadix, thank you Sky Polaris, thank you Great Cakes Mods, and thank you Monsoon. You all did a really, really wonderful job with this mod. So with these mods. So yeah, I really, really, really hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Hope you guys like and subscribe. Always remember to hit the little bell icon to get notified of learning things. So yeah, if you guys enjoyed this video, hope you guys like and subscribe, and bye-bye.